Hey guys, today we're taking a look at the S.H.Monsterarts Godzilla vs. King Kong Godzilla. And if you want to buy this figure, check down in the description below. I put a link to the Big Bad Toy Store, Amazon, and eBay where you should be able to buy this figure. Be warned though, Amazon and eBay probably will be aftermarket prices as they usually always are. But nonetheless, they'll be in the description below if you want to buy them. Now, taking a look at the actual figure, from my first impressions, this figure is pretty good. I mean, just the wonderful sculpting and paint already show a lot of prowess. And maybe since this was one of my first S.H.Monsterarts figures, I'm just impressed by it. But I know that the S.H.Monsterarts names carries a lot of weight in painting and sculpting. And this figure carries up to that. It does not disappoint. Now, the figure is nicely articulated. There are some loose bits. There are some floaty pieces like Kong, but we'll get to those in a minute. But overall, just having him standing there in a power pose, I think the figure is wonderful. Now, let's get into the few accessories that Godzilla comes with. Now, taking a look at accessories, Godzilla came with a pair of relaxed hands, and that's it. I really wish the figure would have come with an atomic breath piece. I think that would have made this figure very nice, but it didn't, so, we'll just have to do what we did come with. Now, looking at these relaxed hands, I just want to say they're perfectly sculpted, and they do hurt, so be careful. But they are wonderfully sculpted. You can just see all the detail, all the nice detail and scale detail you got from the figure, you get on the hands as well, and it's just so nice. And I mean, even the paint, which is minimal, but it's just applied nicely to the hands, and I think they make the accessories pop very nicely. Now, before I get into articulation, I'd like to mention the problems with this figure. And unfortunately, this figure has a couple of big problems. My main issue, and I think an issue a couple of people had with the figure, is just that gap. You see that? You can see the back of my review station from there. It's terrible. And I feel like they could have easily filled that up, or they could have made it so that at least the thigh could cover up. I'm pretty sure there's some way to do it, but I'm just reviewing the figure as it came out of the box, and out of the box it has that ugly gap right there. And since we're on the back here, I'd also like to mention the problems I have with the tail, which is unfortunate. This was my first S.H.Monsterarts figure, and I heard that the tails were amazing. You could get beautiful poses out of them, but unfortunately, as you see here, my tail is loose, and it came out of the packaging like this, and I was disappointed. These figures are supposed to have organic tail poses, which I can still pull off, but he'll never be able to have that nice tail up pose, or maybe even be able to shoot his atomic ray kind of like this, having the tail support him, because it's just too loose. And if the tip is too loose, the base here is way too tight. I can barely move it at all. It's really weird that the base is super tight, but then when I come here to the more middle section, it's perfectly fine until I reach the tip where it's too loose. So 2/3 of the tail are very bad, and then just this middle section, at least for my figure, is basically carrying the entire weight of the tail. Now, let's get on to articulation. Now, getting into articulation, this figure is like Kong in the sense that it's filled to the brim with dumbbell joints, and basically every single joint in here is a dumbbell joint, which isn't bad, but I'm pretty sure in some cases they could have used just the normal ball joint and not had to use the dumbbell joint, but I digress. So, starting from the head down, we have a nice opening hinge joint here at the mouth. Then we have a dumbbell joint here to here. This is a floating piece, and that gives it for a nice, let me move back here, that gives a nice up and a nice down, and of course a nice swivel. The base of the neck here is kind of tight. The joint is in there, it's okay, but since it's the base of the neck and it's covered by both of these pieces, it is a little limited, but you can get a small swivel out of there. This part right here of the neck is a floating piece, and if you have it the wrong way, you can kind of see the joint in there, and it's disappointing. Moving down here at the upper abs or the bicep section, here he has a nice up and a nice down. It is a little loose, like minimal pressure can move it up and down, but I don't mind that as much. Then the whole chest here segmented into 3 pieces, 1, 2, and 3, and that should have the same amount of articulation as I showed in the top, and that allows for a so-so crunch and then an okay arch. For the arch and the crunch, of course, you're gonna have to use maybe a little more of the leg here. But overall, I think it's an okay. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. Then over here, we have a limited outward movement at the shoulder, a limited inward movement, a very nicely, not too tight, but not too loose swivel there at the shoulder. Then we have a double elbow joint, a double hinge right there. This part of the arm right here, that's a floating piece that's attached to this joint, and I forgot how these are called, but it's one of those arm joints or hand joints that allows for a nice up and down, and then a nice side to side when you rotate the joint. What I said for this arm applies for this one, and then here at the legs, you have a nice rotation here, a nice double elbow, not elbow, but a nice double joint here at the knee, similar to the elbow one. This is another floating piece there, and then for the foot we have a good up, a so-so down, and an okay swivel. Now for the articulation of the leg, I will say that the leg, I think, or not the leg, the tail here, this is segmented into what I'm pretty sure is 26 or 13. It's a pretty big number of dumbbell joints, and that goes for all of these dumbbell joints here until this very tip where it's all connected. Now, onto the final thoughts for the figure. Now, for my final thoughts on the figure, I must say, it's not a bad figure, but it's not that good either. The issues for me, or at least in my figure, especially that tail and that gap, really ruin it for me. I wish it was at least nicely, for the thigh, I wish it was seamless, or there's a way I could shift the thigh back to cover it. And then for the tail, I just wish it wasn't so loose and then wasn't so tight, although I could fix that up myself, and I probably will. The sculpting is very nice, the painting is very nice, although it was a little bit gloppy, or there are a lot of splotches in the mouth. I feel like they could have done a little bit easier. And I know a lot of people don't like how the mouth is, and I know there is a trick where if you blackwash it with a little bit of paint, you can bring out a lot of that nice mouth detail. I don't think I'll be doing that on mine, considering this figure was almost $80, but it's a nice thing to consider if you really don't like the paint. But overall, I have to give this figure a 3 out of 5 stars. I wish I could give it more, but I think that is really the amount I am willing to give this figure. It's not a bad figure, it's okay.